Chapter 11. A Dead Man's Knife. One of the fleet of schooners assembled in the area was a Frenchman, the same boat that had traded tobacco to the weir here. A fierce roaring wave the night before had caught one of her crew, broken his back, and killed him. The next morning Harvey saw the ship moving into deep water for the funeral. Borrowing Disco's spyglass, Harvey watched an oblong bundle slide over the side, with no service accompanying it. At anchor that night, a slow hymn-like song came over the black water from the Frenchman. Harvey and Dan listened without speaking, though Emmanuel hummed quietly along. Harvey and Dan were fishing from the Hattie S the next morning when another dory pulled past them. "They're auctioning off his belongings," called the man. There was no need to ask whose belongings, for they saw a crowd of dories heading toward the Frenchman. Dan looked over at Harvey. "Shall we go see what's there?" he asked. "It'll give us a chance to get warmed up, too." Harvey nodded, and they began to row. "Won't his family want his things?" he asked. Dan shrugged. Tom Platt said there wasn't any family, though an auction ain't the usual way to do things. The dead man's belongings were spread out on the deck for all to see, from his red knitted cap to his leather belt with a sheath and a knife at the back. After examining the things, Dan bought the dead man's knife, which had a curious brass handle. Included in the price was the sheath and leather belt. Back in the Hattie S, they pushed off in a drizzle of rain, which made them shiver in their oilskin jackets. In a moment they were in the heart of a white fog, which dropped on them without warning. Though they could not see a boat's length in any direction, Harvey was not frightened. This was a fisherman's life, so they dropped their lines and found the cod biting well. Dan drew out his new knife and examined the edge. "You notice how all his shipmates stepped back when I bid?" he asked. "Yes," replied Harvey. "They let you get it cheap. Why was that?" "They're superstitious about taking knives from a dead man." "But an auction isn't taking anything," protested Harvey. "It's business." "Their superstitions don't hold to that. And besides, the captain of the Frenchman told me this knife was used on the French coast last year." Harvey's eyes opened wide. "Used? You mean used on somebody?" "Killed him. Of course, when I heard that, I was keener than ever to get it," said Dan. "Think of that," said Harvey. "Say, I'll give you $1 for it when I get paid. No, I'll give you $2. "Honest? You like it all that well?" said Dan, flushing. "Well, to tell you the truth, I kind of got it for you. I already have a knife, and I saw you didn't have any, and so, being dory mates and all, Still, I don't want to tell you until I knew what you thought of the knife, so take it and welcome, Harv." And he handed the knife and belt to Harvey. Harvey just stared at the gift for a few moments, then protested weakly, "Oh, Dan, you were the one who bought it. I don't." "Take it," insisted Dan. "I want you to have it. Now that's an end to it." Harvey struggled against taking the gift for a few more seconds, then accepted it eagerly. "Well, thanks, Dan. Thanks a lot. I'll keep it as long as I live." "That's good to hear," said Dan with a pleased smile. "Hey, it looks as if your line's hooked on to something." Harvey fastened the belt around himself before turning to tug on his line. "It's fouled, I guess. It could be a strawberry bottom." Dan reached over and gave Harvey's line a tweak. "Sometimes a halibut will act that way. Yank her once and twice and see if she gives." Harvey yanked on the line and it seemed to give. Then Dan decided they'd better make certain that it was hooked, so they hauled up together. Dan hooked each length of line around the boat's cleats to make it as fast as the weight rose sluggishly. "Here she comes! Haul!" shouted Dan. But his shout ended with a double shriek of horror, for out of the sea rose the body of the dead Frenchman, cast into the water 2 days before. The hook had caught him under the right armpit. Now he swayed, erect and horrible, his head and shoulders above the water. His arms were tied behind him, and he had no face. The boys clutched one another and cowered in a heap at the bottom of the dory. The faceless body continued to bob alongside, held on the shortened line. "Oh, Harv, quick, quick, take the belt off. He's come for it." Harvey fumbled with the buckle of the belt. "I don't want it," groaned Harvey, but he got the belt open and whispered to Dan, the line still holding fast. Together they looked at the head that had no face under its streaming hair. Dan slipped out his knife and cut Harvey's line. At the same time, Harvey flung the belt with the sheath knife far over the side. The body shot down at once, and Dan cautiously rose to his knees, his face white as fog. "I've seen a body hauled up on trowel, and it didn't bother me none. But he come to us special," he said. Harvey shook his head, still dazed. I wish I wish I hadn't taken the knife. Then he would have come on your line. Then he gave himself a mental shake. But how could he come to us special? It was the tide. Tide? Scoffed Dan, his voice still shaky. Why, they sunk him 6 miles south of the fleet, and we're 2 miles beyond that. They told me he was weighted down with 1.5 fathoms of chain cable. Harvey did not argue further. Wonder what it was that made him kill that man up on the French coast. Whatever it was, he must be needing that knife again. And what are you doing with the fish, Harv? Heaving them overboard? Why, we won't be eating them. I don't care, said Harvey, throwing back fish after fish. I had to look at his face while I was taking off the belt. You can keep your catch if you want. I've no use for mine. Dan said nothing, but started throwing his fish over the side, too. When they had cleared the boat of cod, Dan said, I wish this fog would lift. Things happen in a fog you won't see in clear weather. One good thing, though, I'm glad he come the way he did instead of walking and searching us out in the night. Stop it, Dan, cried Harvey. Remember, we're still on top of him. I wish we were back safe on the we're here. They'll be looking for us in a while. Hand me the tutor. Harvey passed the dinner horn to Dan, who did not blow it but sat looking at it thoughtfully. Go on, blow, urged Harvey. I don't want to stay here all night. The question is, how might he take it, replied Dan with a look and nod down at the sea. A man from down the coast once told me that on his ship they didn't dare blow a horn to call in the dories. The skipper that had owned her once had drowned a boy when he tried to haul in his dory and was too drunk to do it right. So ever after, when they'd blow a horn in the fog, that boy would row alongside with the rest, calling, Dory, 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 Dory. A muffled voice cried through the fog. Dan dropped the horn, and the boys cowered in the bottom of the dory. Then the call came again. Harvey raised his head and said, Hold on, that sounded like the cook. Dan sat up and peered in the fog. Sure it does. I don't know why I thought of that fool tale. It was a dumb thing to do. Then he sang out, It's me and Harvey, over here. They heard oars, but could see nothing until the cook rowed up alongside. What happened? Asked the cook. You be beaten for giving us trouble. We all look for you. We'd welcome a beating, said Dan seriously, just so's we're safe aboard again. As the cook passed them a line, Dan told him what had happened. The cook listened in silence and said, Yes, I see it as the truth. He came for his knife. The cook, with his second sight, rowed them unerringly to the we're here. A warm glow of light from the cabin and the smell of delicious fried pork and hot bread greeted them. For Harvey and Dan it was heavenly to hear Disco and the others at the rail promising them a good beating for the worry and trouble they'd caused, because it meant that they were home at last. But the cook had a plan of his own, and so before he latched the ropes to his dory, he recounted to Disco and the crew the most striking points of the boy's tale of the knife. Then he gave his opinion that Harvey was a mascot to destroy any possible bad luck. Impressed, the crew took the boys aboard as heroes of a strange and wonderful tale, and even laughed at the superstition surrounding it. There was no beating, but instead respectful questions. Later, though Penn and Salter scoffed, the cook put a lighted candle, a cake of flour and water, and a pinch of salt on a shingle and floated them onto the sea. It was meant to keep the Frenchman quiet in case he was still restless. Dan lit the candle because he had bought the belt, and the cook kept murmuring incantations as long as he could see the flame. Thus, when Harvey went to bed, he didn't have the bad dreams he feared would haunt him thereafter.